So most of you have lovely hair, big, beautiful, flowing locks that you can make shapes out of and then put gradients on there to suggest the highlights and the shadows and make something that's quite nice. Others of us have this kind of baby bird little scribbly bits of hair. And how could you possibly get that look? How can you get that kind of, really fine detail in where your hair meets your scalp? So I want to show you quickly how you can do that. I'm sharing my screen. We're going to go back into our friend Illustrator. Here's my illustration so far. I'm kind of happy with how that's coming together. A couple of things that I wanted to just point out. We talked about compound paths. I've made my spectacles by using the compound path. I drew the outside shape and then those three inside holes and then made the whole thing a donut. And so now you can see through that. Same trick I used right here on my mouth. Again, I keep telling you, please make sure to create layers for all these things. I've got a mouth layer, an eyes layer, facial shading, specs, blah, blah, blah. So all these things are on their own layer, but this is actually a compound path. I drew the outside of the lips, the inside of the lips, made those two a compound path, and then I could bring it forward and hide things like the back of the teeth and the gums and all those, bits and pieces that are in there. I also just made a little bit of a blend right here on this to get that highlight right there. So I just drew two shapes and then blended them together. So that's kind of how this thing looks right now in outline mode. That's how it looks in preview. But the point that we're trying to talk about is this business up here. I've got like kind of a helmet drawn for my hair. I'm on the TB hair layer and I've got like clunk, 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 really dumb looking hair. So let's see if we can't make that a little more interesting and complex. There is a tool under the rotate tool, or maybe your toolbar is set up differently, but maybe it looks like this. There's a thing called the width tool. Normally it shows up like that. And we haven't even talked about how to use that. It's a pretty cool tool, actually. It's got lots of other tricks to it. But underneath that, look at that. There's warp, there's twirl, there's pucker, there's blow, there's scallop, all kinds of other stuff that's underneath here. So I just want to point out a couple of tricks that you can use. Scallop tool, if I grab that and then double click it again, I get controls for how big it's going to be. I don't want it very big. I don't want a huge brush on the end of this. Think of it like a brush. So I've got 10 point and 10 point for the width and the height. And then you can change things like complexity and detail in here. Most of this, you're just going to have to see what works for you. Try it, experiment, explore, mess around. You can't go wrong with messing around. I just think everybody should just experiment with this. But look what happens when I do that. If I just kind of roll along that shape there, I start to get this really interesting pattern that shows up. Now, maybe I don't like how it's working and I want to change how that's doing its thing, but I can go back and fix that later. So you select the shape that you want to work on, and then you bring your scallop tool out and you play with it. There's also a wrinkle tool in here, which is different. Cancel that. I've shown you the scallop tool. Wrinkle lives right at the bottom of that menu, and you can also use that. Double click on it once it's selected and change the size that you want. Maybe we'll do a little bit bigger brush just to show you the differences. Again, my complexity and my detail and the brush affects anchor points and a million other controls. And then I can come back in here and kind of go and wrinkle that up. And so I can play with the way that my hair kind of comes out of my head and starts to create a more interesting, more accurate shape without having to go in there with the pen tool and draw all these little tiny points. So that's the scallop and the wrinkle tool. There are others in there, bloat and pucker, things that you can go experiment with and explore. Obviously, I'm not happy with how that looks yet, but you can see where you can get the solution for the trick that you're trying to accomplish. I hope that helps. If you have a question about something, I will make a video for you. See ya.